r/NuclearRevenge by Radical. My dogs defend my family and my friend. This was many years ago and I was never charged. The case was closed as a home invasion that was stopped with reasonable force. My dogs were not harmed or removed from me. My neighbor, let's call her Anne, was a nice lady. A single mum with one little boy. When she moved she had some rat issues caused by the previous owner's hoarding. And since I am not bothered by rats, and had a rat dog as well as my big boys and girls, I was able to help out a bit. She and my wife became great friends and her boy loved my mastiffs and the Great Dane I owned back then. Often when Anne was working her lad would come and stay with my wife and I, and the dogs, after school and on weekends. About a year after Anne moved in she told us she was sure she was being followed by a man who had approached her in a bar on one of her twice yearly nights out with her sister. She barely went out socializing. It was sheer bad luck she met this man at all, and asked us to keep an eye out for his type and color car. And if we could get his number plate she could give it to the police. We, of course, promised to help, and carried on about that day. Late that night my Dane woke me whining, and led me to the side door. This opened onto a shared driveway with my neighbor. I opened it thinking he needed to go to the toilet in the garden. But as soon as I opened it I saw man inside Anne's kitchen. And then heard her scream. I dashed over the drive and pushed open her kitchen door. He had forced it. Probably what woke my dogs, and shouted at him to stop. He went for me. Realized pretty quickly I knew how to fight. And that he was losing. In the struggle he managed to get free. And took off down the road. We called the police and reported it. And gave statements when the police arrived. Anne and her boy stayed with us for the rest of the night. The next day she went to stay with relatives using another friend's car just in case he was hanging around. I scouted ahead a bit to make sure she could get away safely. What the police and I worked out had happened was he quietly broke into my kitchen through the side door. My mastiffs and the Dane waited till he was deep in the house before they struck. He was ragdolled by the neck from behind by my Dane. And while this was happening the mastiffs tore his legs to shreds. The little rat my wife owned got stuck in two from the blood all over him at the end of it. He had suffered multiple fatal wounds to his thighs, neck and face. The rapist intruder had a backpack on with knives, duct tape, gags and a small hand axe, DNA, and had scratched him. And my and Anne's statements confirmed he was the same man who had tried to rape my neighbor. He had no idea I had large dogs it seems. Or he was really ducking stupid. Who cares? Those dogs have all died of old age now. But I bred from the mastiffs and still have their pups and grandpups. The Dane made it to 12 which is ancient for one of them. Anne got a mastiff from me shortly after this event. And she still owns large dogs too. I recommend a large dog as a companion. And as something that will duck up any intruder for you. As Bill Burr says it's like owning a gun you can pet. Catfish thief after having my wallet and cell phone stolen. Then destroy their life. Cross post from r/ProRevenge. A friend told me it may fit better here but honestly after reading some of these stories this seems potentially mild. Despite the fact it ends in jail time. I'll let you guys be the judge. When I was college, I had my wallet stolen. This is where my 6-month revenge story begins. At the beginning of the fall semester, I was working out in the college gym one morning and realized when I returned that my wallet was not in my pants that I had left in my locker. Assuming that I just left it in my dorm. I didn't think too much about it and went to lunch. When I got to the dining hall for lunch and sat down with some friends, I heard that some other people who had been to the gym recently were missing things: watches, cell phones, wallets, etc. One of my best friends was missing his phone. And we realized we had been robbed and spent the rest of the meal bitching about gym security and just accepting our fate. I later learned this sort of theft from the gym locker rooms had been going on for months. This is important later. Later in the evening we were sitting around playing FIFA. And tried calling my buddy's phone just to see what would happen. It rang. The idiot thief didn't turn off the phone. And we basically called him 100 times because we knew there was a limited amount of time to get in touch before the phone died. This was before Find My Phone was as widespread as it is today. So we were bummed when the thief never answered the phone. About to give up. I received a text on my phone reading, "What the duck, stop calling me." Perfect. The thief starts texting back. And to be honest, I was surprised by how empathetic he was being with me about getting robbed. I started sending friendlier and friendlier texts, saying things like, "You're actually a pretty cool guy and I get why you would steal these things just laying around." When he apologized directly, I was like, "Forgive and forget, man. Don't worry about it." At this point, my only goal was to get my ID back. After texting for a while, I realized that the only way this guy would meet up is if he had something to gain. So I started asking over text if I could pay him for the stolen stuff. He wasn't very interested in that, probably because we didn't offer enough money. But eventually the conversation led to drugs. Now, this was after like 10 days of texting back and forth. So it wasn't super abrupt because we had talked about parties, drinking, smoking pot. We were essentially catfishing this guy to believe we were friends, so there is a lot of filler conversation I am leaving out. The surprising part about his drug offer though was that he wanted to sell me acid, which was pretty hardcore based on the conversation so far. I'm not a narc, but the acid dealer / grand larceny combo made me realize this guy is making 100% of his income off of criminal activities. At this point I thought I might be in over my head. So I went to the campus public safety to see if they could help. Here was my pitch. I am in contact with a guy who has been stealing from students at the gym, and I am setting up a drug sting. I want your help. Their response was, "What the duck? You cannot do this." Fine. Looks like we have to go rogue. The next day comes and I skip all my classes. I called a friend who had grown up in the area and gone to the public high school near my college. And then called another friend with a dorm room overlooking the trash can where the deal was to go down. Then the stakeout began. We watched for like 3 hours while listening to stand-up comedy in the dorm room and ducking around. It was a fun reason to skip class. Finally I get a text from the guy that warns me to not try anything funny because he was with a friend with a knife. Sure enough, we see a skinny white kid carrying a yellow bag approaching the trash can along with a short, squat guy in a big hoodie. I call the stolen cell phone and can see the guy pick up. The next words I said were a total lie and probably risky to our overall plan, but ended up working out. "Hey man, I called the cops and they are on campus looking for a guy with a yellow bag. There's no cash under the trash can. But if I were you I would ditch the bag and get out of here." He cussed me out, dropped the bag where he stood, and started running into the woods. What he didn't realize is that we were only like 30 feet away in a second-story dorm room and my friend from the area recognized him from the relatively small high school they both attended. She was like, "Holy shit, it's Cletus." Obviously I am using a fake name here, but honestly Cletus is not that far off from the hillbilly ass name this dude actually had. We go down to collect the yellow bag and find my ID, credit cards, my friend's ID, and no drugs. The lack of drugs was kind of a relief when the next part of this story started going down. It is also important to note that my friend's cell phone was not returned in the yellow bag even though that was the original deal. 6 months later, I get a letter in the mail. It turned out that Cletus' home had a shit ton of drugs in it, and a shit ton more of items reported stolen by students. A lot of the stuff stolen from my classmates was returned, and I was given notice that a restraining order had been filed on my behalf that was to keep Cletus 500 yards away from me. I wasn't too worried about keeping my distance though, because the letter also informed me that Cletus would be spending the next 36 months in prison for the shit they found in his home. I would be long graduated and out of Dodge by the time he was released. The final kicker was that I also received a check for just around $180 for the wallet and cash stolen from me that were never recovered. Paid for by hours of labor from Sweet Cletus. TLDR. Guy robs me and a friend. We catfish him into becoming our friends. Arrange a meetup and duck his life up. Try to ruin my life? Have fun with your 30-year prison sentence. $100,000 fine and record as a sex offender. TW. Sexual assault and suicide. Let me start off by saying when this story happened, my parents educated me on don't trust strangers on the internet but never talked about internet friends. They assumed I would stay local and only talk to people I knew. They were very wrong in assuming so. This story includes loads of backstory, but I'll take some of the less important parts out to shorten it. Obviously none of these names are real. All of it is really important to the story. But I'm putting a TLDR at the end. Summer going into freshman year, I had just joined the girls varsity swim team. I had a few friends from middle school on the team, but one of the girls I was closer to than the others. Let's call her Tiffany. Tiffany and I started hanging out more and more, and eventually I became a part of her circle. This was around the time that Kik was huge, and she added me to the group chat with a lot of her internet friends. It was at this point where I was introduced to the catfish, who we'll call Kevin. He lived in the next state over and was a main participant in the group chat. Very easy to like because of his banter and his good attitude. Kevin was online dating a friend, who we'll call Angelica. She was a part of Tiffany's circle, and was in the group chat with us. As time went on, Kevin took an interest to me, and soon we became friends outside of the fateful group chat. We talked every day, at least 3+ hours on the phone, and eventually I introduced him to some of my other friends around my town. He ended up becoming friends with people in at least 7 different schools in my district, and most of my freshman class knew who he was. The most notable of all of my friends who I introduced to Kevin was Patricia. Patricia was a year younger than me but was still one of my closest friends. And unfortunately she got dragged down almost as much as I did. After I was cleared to go home, I got my phone back and decided I needed to repair the bridges that were burned. I texted Patricia and asked how she was doing, trying to make amends. Immediately she texts back apologizing for being so distant, and then asks if I have talked to Kevin recently. I said yes, that we had been dating for months. She absolutely lost it. She FaceTimed me and we talked for hours about everything Kevin had said to us to turn us against each other. How messed up everything was. I felt so angry, powerless and hurt by everything that had happened. I asked Patricia if I could confront Kevin with the information I had. She agreed. I texted Kevin saying some pretty nasty things, saying I never wanted to talk to him again, and if he talked to Patricia I would send people after him. Kevin retorted, saying if I told Patricia what I knew, he had no idea any of the info I had came from her. He would make a group chat full of at least 50 people from every school in my district, send my nudes into it, and tell everyone who I slept with. Kevin knew I was raped the beginning of the year, but wanted everyone to think I was a liar. He was the only person I told, and used it against me. I called him bluff, and told Patricia what he said. We both didn't believe he would do anything, so she confronted him. The next morning he did exactly what he said we was gonna do. My parents found out and it was the absolute worst moment in my life. Now throughout these 3 years we all kept tabs on Kevin, and we all drove away any potential girlfriend he would come into contact with. But there was this one girl, who we'll call Katie, who didn't believe anything we said. Kevin met Katie halfway through my sophomore year of high school. We laid out all the evidence for her and she still refused to believe us. At that point we began harassing her, almost to the point of cyberbullying. Trust me, I'm not proud of this at all. But we had no clue what else to do to drive her away from him. She eventually blocked us. But several months later it happened. Katie texted all of us, saying we were right and how he was an absolute ducking psychopath. She also said he raped her in her sleep, and when she woke up he strangled her until she was unconscious. The next day she woke up to multiple texts of him apologizing profusely for what he did, and sent pictures of him cutting himself. She had evidence of this, but was terrified to go to the police because he also threatened her life if he ever told anyone. This fueled the fire, and now I formed a plan to duck and destroy him. I told her I wanted to help her, but in no way pushed her to do what happened next. The revenge. I told my parents I was spending the night at Patricia's. We drove the 5.5-hour drive to his hometown, and met with Katie. I explained that if she went to the police now, she would give other girls a chance to be saved. I guaranteed her protection and she finally agreed. We went to the local police station that night, and I helped her file a report. The police said they would bring him in for questioning and such, but there was no guarantee they would be able to press charges. Even with the photos and the texts, there was no DNA and no rape kit because it was weeks later. We later found out that the boyfriend grabbed a couple buddies, went to his house, beat him senseless, nothing major, just a lot of bruising and a black eye, and destroyed his car. At the hospital, police questioned him, and he attempted to assault one of the officers for accusing him of something he didn't do. He was then arrested after the hospital cleared him. His family was too poor to bail him out. So while he was in jail, the police had a warrant to search his phone and laptop to find any evidence they could of the sexual assault. Not only did they find the texts corroborating Katie's story, they found my nudes along with Patricia's, Angelica's, and at least 10 other girls who were very underage. Since he was a legal adult at the time the pictures were found on his computer, he was also charged with possession of child pornography. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I sent in a written testimony, as did Patricia and Angelica. I also sent as much proof as I could to Katie's lawyer to set a precedent on character. It was all entered in as evidence anonymously per my request. Kevin's family didn't have enough money for a lawyer, so the public defender was his only option. He tried to plead consent, which didn't work. Looking back now, almost a year later, everything seems so surreal. I'm not ashamed of anything except harassing Katie, because she's a good friend with a really good heart. She's coping slowly but surely. I make time to call her every day and check on her, and she's now going to a big university for teaching. Kevin to this day has no idea it was me who set everything up. I might visit him in federal prison one day just to see the look on his face and tell him it was me who absolutely destroyed his life. But for now, I'm satisfied just knowing he's rotting in there. TLD, a guy from another state catfished me, raped his girlfriend and sent my nudes around. I convinced his girlfriend to press charges, in which he assaulted an officer. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison for rape, child pornography, and assaulting an officer, with a $100,000 fine. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.